just don't waste your time becoming an NFL fan. Just stay a college football fan.
Especially not the Broncos.
Particularly
that's
not
a
the
good
Broncos.
point. That's a good point. That's fair. Carry on. We're going to have to edit that out. Welcome back to the Cornelius Seed Podcast. This is Juan, Cornelius Seed Innovation Lead. And today I'm joined by Craig Alleman, our lead agronomist, and James Cornelius, one of the owners. In this episode, we're going to give you a behind-the-scene look into our product selection process. We're going to go into that, and we're going to discuss everything involved around that and how we come to bring you the best hybrids that work out in your field. So at any rate, welcome, Craig and James.
Good morning.
Morning. Welcome.
Let's jump in, guys. So one of the things with product selection I think about like the NFL draft. October and September, we all know that's prime time for harvest. And for you guys, it's that time where you're going through, you're getting out, how are things performing, what looks good, what doesn't. So I want to approach it this way. So if seed selection was the NFL draft, how do you go about identifying that first round pick?
Well, I'll start off on that. I mean, it's not, even with all the technology that we have today and being able to, manage data and pour through that and everything, it probably is a lot like the NFL draft. That's a great comparison, and I use that myself when I talk about new hybrids. But it really boils down to a lot of hard work, is the key to it, like many things do. We're looking at hybrids, varieties all through the year. I mean, through the summer, not just ones that are potentially going to be new ones that we'll produce, but the ones we've just produced, and comparing that to our existing hybrids and continuing to do a better job of where we would place those hybrids and how they do under different environments. But all through the year, we're looking at these newer hybrids. But in the fall, when you can really see the end product and you can see things like stay green and standability and root strength and disease tolerance and things like that, that's when it really starts to heat up. Maybe if you're talking about an NFL scenario, that would be like the combine, where you really see these different hybrids compared to each other, and you see all their qualities and all their traits. And also from a independent perspective, we're going to be selecting hybrids out of not just the big program. So that would be, like your Ohio States or Alabama's or whatever as a comparison to the NFL draft, but we're going to get those nuggets coming out of those smaller programs too. We just maybe need to do a little more hard work to uncover those. But, those are things that you don't see, in a corporate type seed company. We're going to have hybrids that are going to, maybe be a fabulous earning hybrid for our customer for 3 or 4 years. It comes out of a program they would never even be looking at. So there's a lot of really good comparisons there to that. But, from our perspective, we get started in September going through genetic trials anywhere from, in our entire footprint. We usually start east in Illinois, and we work in through Iowa and into Nebraska and finish up in the northern states like Wisconsin. And so we'll be looking at these hybrids in a lot of different scenarios. The nice thing there is it's just like, as a farmer, when you select your hybrids or when you talk to your seed companies about hybrids, it's nice to look at your local data, but really weather is the number one thing every year that will always affect hybrid performance or variety performance. So to be able to look through a large geography, Eastern Iowa may have the weather in 2025 that Western Iowa had in 2024. So we're able to see these hybrids under a large variety of conditions, not just soil types, that's important as well, but also just the different weather that they went through in the different areas. So, we pour through looking and physically taking notes in September and early October. And then again, we'll have the genetic suppliers come in starting in the first part of December. Once the combines have rolled through, once the data has been recorded, and then we can match up yield to, the physical characteristics that we already have a bunch of notes on, and then decide what we need to bring in the lineup that's going to work the best specifically in our area, because we're not going to sell out in Ohio. We're not selling out in western Nebraska or Colorado. We're in the the heart of the Corn Belt that is our footprint, and so we need the hybrids that are going to be the best there. We don't need the hybrids that are going to go from coast to coast. So that's where, as an independent seed company, we think is our strength there, is we're selecting hybrids very geographically suited.
Okay, something I want to kick off over to James real quick is to, one of the things that I feel like we anybody will come across is I've got a favorite hybrid and it's either going to leave. Like, I'm curious, what goes through your mind as you're identifying what's going to come the product list, and what are you and how do you fill that void? So for growers that fall in love with a particular number and you say, hey, it's time for it to retire, bringing in someone new, how to walk us through that process, if you will.
Yeah, so every now and again there are the favorite hybrids. Over the years, I've been a part of having to remove a few of those. 633 SmartSex in its entire portfolio of a product and different trade platforms is probably one of those that's one of the most relevant to it. There's a few others right now. Really, when we're hearing about hybrids that people love and people are excited about, they've probably been in the lineup for a long time. I think when it comes down to it, a lot of times those hybrids were step changes when we brought them out, and that just really performed, filled a niche place that needed something to perform better. And really, they've been able to stick around for a long time because they had a new yield level that was brought out. Now, with that being said, obviously all the breeding that's happening, the new traits that come out, and the way that we're selecting new hybrids. Eventually, as a hybrid's been around for 6 years or something like that, which is a rarity anymore, we're just finding that when you show them head to head, yes, the 633s of the world are fantastic hybrids and are doing great. But if you want to talk about raising your farm yields to the next level, we need to advance to the next products moving forward. Sometimes that's not what you want to hear, and sometimes it's still a great thing. That's why we always want to try new hybrids while we're keeping old ones around. If you think about it, 25% of your farming portfolio and what you plant on the ground to maybe do brand new hybrids, and then 50% of them being ones that have been around for a little while, and then 25% of it's your old favorites. It's a great way to always diversify your farm entity and still get the new genetics with the top end yields at the same time.
Yeah, we're very. It's a very competitive business, so we're very conscious, of keeping up on the cutting edge of yield. There's a lot of other things that go along with that. Standability, green snap tolerance, disease tolerance. So, we manage that as well. But we have to continue, to bring in new hybrids as the genetic yield increase happens. And that, the modern technology traits are great. I think the technology that's brought us, that's made the breeding programs quicker and more responsive and gave us a much quicker genetic gain or more impressive to me than the traits. And so because of that, we have to move fairly rapidly. And when you have a hybrid that has been in the lineup 4, 5, 6 years, that's pretty long in this day and age. And we probably keep them around, because of our response to our customers and filling their needs. We probably keep them around longer than maybe a corporate company does. But, you always got to continue to move on and bring the next best thing in.
Where all do you guys, here in the office, whenever we see, you got a schedule of you guys, just it seems like you're on the road for a month straight. Those are is that the field tours, genetic field days, or where do you guys go and how do you pick where you want to go?
Yeah, so as we're looking at genetic field days in the fall, as Craig mentioned, usually kind of starts in Illinois, as some of the locations there are a little farther south. But the number one key is to hit those plots when we're looking at them to be right when they're turning, when they're starting to senesce. That way you can see the difference between the hybrids that died out early or ones that are staying green and lasting a lot longer. There's always suggestions to what the maturities of these products are suggested to be. And you can also determine that by what the yield versus moisture ratio is at the end of the year. But sometimes there's also just the reality of the state green being significantly different. That's something to really pay attention to. And if all you did is go out there in late October and November and start to look at it, well, everything's brown and dead, and it's pretty hard to do get a real good understanding of what happened. Same to be said about when it's super green. We usually wait a little bit to go, but we do go out and look at corn earlier than that, obviously, with field days and whatnot for our growers to come look at the products. A lot of times those are before harvest starts, simply because once harvest starts, growers want to be in their own fields harvesting the grain. But as we look at these things, there's other unique points to why we go different areas. I mean, it's somewhat been said at times, well, we don't care what happens in Ohio, or we don't care what happens in Colorado. And that's probably not exactly true. Now, is it a big thing on, say, what the yields are in either of those places? Not necessarily, but we do pay attention to, say, what happens in western Nebraska as far as if we're trying to rate a hybrid for green snap tolerance or wind tolerance, how well it stands. Same with disease package as we go east. Out east, they're plagued with a lot more disease pressure on a regular basis than we do on an annual basis here in Illinois and Iowa, and Wisconsin. So it really helps us understand, say, when we're trying to pick between the two hybrids, because, like as you said, when you have that combine in the NFL and every little statistic is right there side by side, same things going on. When we go to all these different genetic suppliers, and I mean, I think I totaled it up that there's about 8 or 9 corn suppliers that we evaluate products from, and it might even be moving to 10 now. But the reality is that doesn't mean that there's only 8 or 9 genetic pools that we're sourcing from. That could be twice that, 3 times that. Those suppliers are collecting those different genetic pools best and comparing them. But when we're trying to compare a product from one pool to another, sometimes that's fairly hard to do, and that's why it's very important to be able to go look at these products and know them better than that way we can extrapolate and figure out which one's going to be better. If you're just sitting there in the Bayer office and you're selecting for a national brand and theirs, and you're just pulling out of your pool, it's kind of like that. You see all the data, compare all the products in your genetic pool, and it's more streamlined to figure it out. So we spend a lot more time trying to figure out and compare cross house which one's going to be better for our growers.
That's that's something that I pride myself in being here. Really, just I know it's not unique to us, and other independent folks have the same approach. But knowing that our customers won't be pigeonholed, right, into one certain line or pool of things, and you guys are bringing in everything else. That's obviously very helpful, very good for the grower. We live in the era of a bunch of seed choices, which is really good. And it could almost be like a dating show. And instead of handing out roses, right, folks are handing out yield data to you guys to appeal to see, what grabs your attention. So I'm kind of curious about that. When you guys are out there, what is that grabs your attention? Are you looking to fill a void when you're out there? Like, you're like, hey, we want to find something in this trait package, in this maturity group. What are you assessing when you're looking to replace an existing product or to bring in something new? Like, whenever SmartStax Pro was launched, we were one of a couple of companies that came out with over 5 offerings for people, which is super cool. So I was just kind of curious, that obviously wowed you. What is it that you guys are assessing for both new and existing products?
Yeah, well, all throughout the year, I mean, I spend a lot of time out in fields, all year long with customers, dealers, and our district sales managers. So I've kind of got my antenna up as we go through there as to what the product needs would be, holes that we may have, whether that's a maturity or whether that's maybe a trait package or just maybe even just characteristics of the hybrids and varieties themselves. But beyond that, we always, before we do our product selection, which we start that in December and really finish up by, mid to the third week in January, where we pretty well have it nailed down as to what we're going to produce next year for new hybrids. But we do a pretty thorough job with our DSMs of having them get that information to us by district as to where they see product holes at, where they see needs, what we need to be comparing to, and things like that. And of course, they're getting that, extensively from their dealers and from just knowing their business well, which they do. So that's kind of the process that we use. So when we go into the product selection, and again, the 5 major companies that we're major genetic suppliers that we're looking at, and as James mentioned, some smaller ones, we've got a list of things that we're looking to fill. It might be a 101 day conventional hybrid, or it may be filling in those gaps in the Smart Stack Pro, since it's still a fairly new trade, or the Power Corn List products or something like that. So we will have needs that we're looking at. But when Tom Brady's probably not a good example, because nobody thought he was going to be as good as he did. But when you have that number 1 round draft pick that pops up, that's out yielding everything in its maturity group by 15 or 20 bushels, you're probably going to bring that in, just because the value is there for our customers. So, some products are, I guess we probably would call no-brainers, as long as the agronomics are there. We have products that we look at that are crazy high yielding and crazy poor on the agronomics, and that's the ones that we just pass on, because we can't be delivering a product like that out to our customers. So, but that's the process that we generally use, as we're doing the selection, and it boils down to listening to your customers. Bottom line, we get that information firsthand and through our dealers and through our DSMs.
Yeah, I would double down on making sure that we're hearing as much as we can from our sales team, from our customer base, on what they want for a new hybrid, where they feel the holes are. I think sometimes, and Craig kind of alluded it to, one thing that they're not able to do is just, they don't have insight on what else is out there. And I think that's something that maybe to a SKU management fault we jump on. And that's when there's a brand new hybrid available in a maturity and a trade package that we're pretty solid in already. There's a lot of companies that'll just decide, but we have something. But that's not what we're going to do. We're going to see that, realize that, hey, this is a brand new thing. It is setting new yield levels with agronomics. It's filling the dream void, if you will. So sometimes we'll be bringing those out, even when a lot of other companies will just decide, I already got a SKU there, I can't do that.
Well, and something that came to mind as you guys were talking, and is that, whenever we're putting plots out there, every once in a while I'll see like an experimental SKU that you're sending out there. How does for our seed reps that are planting these experimental numbers, and I'm sure they work with you guys to get feedback, and do you does it go from observing from the suppliers straight into our lineup, or do you bring it in and look at it first just to verify some things? And I'm kind of curious how this rolls into the experimental products that we put in some plots.
And 9 times out of 10, an experimental is in there because we saw it the year before, but we weren't comfortable enough, with the amount of data, whatever it may have been, to have added it to the lineup. You got to remember, these, if it's an experimental, it was available the year before, and the companies are doing all kinds of testing. We get their data, replicated data across our entire geography. So it's not that we needed more data in that sense, but it was good enough, that we feel like we need to give it another look. And so next year, the next following year, after we've tested it, we'll have their data, but we've also had it in our plots. We've seen it, come out of the ground through harvest. So we'll have extra notes on it. And, if the data looks good again next year, it just puts us that much further ahead on placement and how it's done in our particular soils. And we'll put it in a lot stressier plots. We'll put it in continuous corn and clay and sand, things like that, we don't get a lot of that from the genetic suppliers. They're usually mostly pretty high productive plots that they're looking at. So it just gives us a jump start if we end up bringing it in the next year. Sometimes we don't. Sometimes it doesn't pan out as good as we thought it would the next year. But that's what we're doing with an experimental. We're kind of taking a look at it.
We kind of do that on corn and soybeans both, obviously with the difference in production of soybeans versus seed corn production. It's more able on the soybean side that we can actually put some of these experimentals out there and then pilot a little bit of it on our own ground. So if all of a sudden, if there's one spot where we're pretty darn confident this should be on our lineup, but there's just one spot we need to see it more, like Craig alluded to, get it on some different soil types, get it in some different areas, compare it to our existing varieties and hybrids. Sometimes if it's coming from a genetic source that is either new or we only have a few hybrids coming out of that pool, we'd like to see it more on head-to-head against the other pools to know that. But we can launch it, and then all of a sudden, if there's on the corn side, if there's that ability to then have that in plots for 2 years, it just really sets the stage for having better confidence in selling it the following year.
Yeah, and I said 9 out of 10, so that other slot is probably, it's a good possibility we may have not had room for it. We may be heavy in that maturity, but it was just good enough to give it another look, because next year when we get through inventory, we may end up having another slot for it. But, you have to make business decisions along with gut feeling sometimes, and sometimes you got to let a hybrid wait another year.
It's pretty neat in the sense of thinking, we've been to meetings where the genetic suppliers are talking about their pipeline and how advancements in technology help them see growing seasons, a lot faster. And so, they're vetting a ton already, and then it's coming to us, to you guys, and then you guys are, boots on ground, really, really vetting if it'll be a fit for our footprint, for our customers, for our particular challenges.
The one thing I probably would add, Juan, that we do also, because James has mentioned it a couple times, it's important to us to be able to compare cross-house, so we see genetic supplier A, how their hybrids do with genetic supplier B. A lot of times they'll use checks, industry checks, hybrids that are competitive hybrids that are doing well. And so we can see how they do against similar checks, but we're also involved in testing programs where the genetic suppliers will put their new stuff in. And so with a lot of these hybrids, not all, but with a lot of these hybrids, we will have cross-house checks, to look at before we bring a hybrid in and produce it for the first time. We think that's really, really important because otherwise that comparison can be somewhat of guesswork.
Yep. With that being said, we also have hybrids that because we go walk the fields more than others, because we know the data in certain pools and really spend a lot of time figuring it out, we do have the confidence in launching products right out of the gates when we have access to them. And what that does is just set us an entire year ahead of our competition sometimes in getting brand new genetics out. The reality is we're trying to get the best of all products and put them together. We sometimes need to negotiate better deals. Sometimes we don't. Again, it just cuts into our profit margins, but our goal is to provide the best entire package to the grower possible. And that's where we're at as far as that. We're really looking at some pretty exciting new things. I mean, the biological space, obviously we just got into Streamline Ag in our last podcast there, spent a lot of time talking about a few of those products. There's also other products that are seed applied technologies that we're really looking into to see what they can do in the more traditional, conventional, and traded products on top of the synthetic herbicides and fungicides or insecticides. But we're also trying to evaluate a few spots for our organic world. There's been trillions of dollars sent into this space, and there's still things out there that really are just little bit of feel good, maybe helps the plant, but there's starting to be some stuff that makes a tremendous difference. And if we can extend the control on those products by a longer time frame, when we add them on top of the synthetic fungicides that put on our seed, or if we're sitting in an organic world where you can't use any of those synthetics and we're really throwing that seed out there naked, we can see some real good benefits here. So pretty excited about that, what's coming down that pipe, and that's where we go to evaluating stuff from everyone we can and seeing what we can put together.
Fantastic. Thank you. I appreciate you covering the quality piece, because I know it's something when I'm having discussions with my brother-in-law, he's like, well, it's the same seed. It goes in the ground, it goes right. And maybe even usually hear it more on the soybean side of the world with him. But it's a huge misconception of it's all the same. I think the biggest piece that folks probably easy to overlook is how much impact that seed quality, the handling, the process of getting it from the field to the bag makes in giving you a seed that can maximize its potential. So kind of moving on to
one thing, Juan, there that kind of popped in my head, if you're going to buy a $250,000 planter, or in other cases spend, on the upwards of $2,000 a row just on some upgrades, because you're adding the new John Deere stuff, the new precision ag, the new whatever you want to call it, so that way you get that picket fence. It's fine and dandy that you can get your planter to put a seed perfectly spaced, perfectly in depth, and in the exact location. But if the seed doesn't grow and you lose 2 to 3 more % because you're planting a lower quality product, then you're not getting the maximum opportunity of all that money you spent on your planter.
Yeah, and I will add from an agronomic perspective too. Beans, there's a pretty wide range in population that you can get by with a soybeans to have your maximum yield. Corn is not that way. We're already on a pretty tight window with corn. We may recommend 32 to 36,000 on a hybrid. If you lose stand on a corn plant, or if your stand is not fully functional, so it's not healthy all year long, doesn't come out of the ground healthy, you've lost a significant amount of yield from day one. So you're getting that seed that's high quality, that's going to germ, and then protecting it with a good seed treatment is just key. And then it's up to the farmer when he wants to plant it, not planting into soils that are too cold, too wet. And, they're very, very aware of that fact. You look at these, everybody is bought into the seed needs to come out of the ground all together at the same time within 24, 48 hours. And the equipment manufacturers have done a great job with that, but it's somewhat of a marketing tool, in my opinion, because if a seed doesn't come out of the ground, yes, it could be seed to soil contact because you've done a poor job with your placement, with your planting. But a lot of times it's because that seedling has been attacked by a seedling disease, Pythium or Fusarium or Rhizoctonia, something like that. I say way more times than not, it's a disease issue than it is an equipment issue when your stand's not coming out of the ground evenly. So, we do the same thing with looking at our seed treatments as we do with our hybrids. We literally do not care where it comes from. We want it to be the best thing for our customers. And we'll spend a little more money to do that. And we spend a lot more time, researching what needs to be on that seed. And that's way, way different than a corporate company. They're going to use the products that they have in-house. And we're going to use what we consider to be the best products. When Viantis came out, which is a superior Pythium product on corn, which is our number one soil-borne fungal disease, we immediately treated everything with it, even went back and overtreated, existing inventory in a lot of cases. We're looking at the Timerium, which is going to be the next new seed treatment that's going to give us cyst nematode control, but also several key diseases, including sudden death. That's going to be a step change. It's just a game changer. We'll have it immediately on our seed as soon as it comes out. So that's really important important for us to focus on. We probably don't get enough credit for that, what our seed treatment is on our seed. But it is superior, and it will continue to be, because we know that that is just so important and such a value to our customers.
Absolutely, and I appreciate you hitting it that way, Craig. That's a good segue for us into what's coming down the pipeline. When I hear you guys talking, I'm hearing RNAi and HT4 and nematicides, and it just all sounds super futuristic and like a big old science experiment. And so I'm curious if we can share with folks, what's that one new trait or technology that's got you the most excited, and what's the biggest game changer that's going to come down the pipeline?
Well, when we're talking about new things, it's not just going to be GMO traits, but also seed treatments and things like that. So I touched base on the Timerium. Now, Timerium is not what it'll end up being, but that's the compound that Syngenta Seed Treatment is going to be bringing out real shortly here. We'll have it on soybeans first, and then it'll be available as corn. But it specifically is it is specifically going to be a nematicide. That's what they went after when they developed it. It's an SDHI family of chemistry. So if you think about that, that's our real long-lasting fungicides that we have. That's the same, they're SDHI family of chemistry too. It's going to be a new nematicide that, we've got some nematicides on the marketplace. We've had some hard chemistry nematicides. We've had some biologicals. This is going to be a hard chemistry product that specifically was developed as a nematicide. As far as I know, it gets every nematode that we deal with in the corn and bean world. So that's going to give us soybean cyst nematode, which is probably our number one yield robber in soybeans across the Midwest. Okay, so that is a game changer. Now, BASF has developed a GMO trait for that. Probably unfortunately for them, because of the value that this product's going to bring, I don't see a lot of value in that, as a traded product. It's going to cost you more money. That money could be spent to put this product on, because not only will this control your soybean cyst nematode, it's going to control your sudden death syndrome. It's going to give you early season frog eye leaf spot, septoria brown spot. So combined with a late season and R3 fungicide application, give you season long control of those two diseases that can be pretty troubling for us. I think there's another, maybe one or two that they're looking at as well, diseases that it may have some control on. So that's just an exciting new product that's not necessarily a trait. We usually think of traits being the new thing that's bringing value to that market, but we will kind of touch base on that. So that you mentioned the RNAi technology for rootworm control. Been here a couple of years now. It's in our Smart Stack Pro, some of the other technologies from some of the other corporate companies. It's been a game changer for us, because with the existing technology, we have always eventually, as the rootworm larvae have gotten bigger, they can survive on the older technology. And so they've come out as adults, continue to lay eggs, and in these 20-year continuous corn areas that we have in our footprint across northern Iowa and northeast Iowa, that population is just so heavy. So this RNAi technology does not have, now maybe they feed on it a little bit longer. So we've developed approaches, probably a two-pronged approach in heavy areas, whether that's Smart Stack Pro and an insecticide, some beetle bombing, things like that. The new TS201 biological is going to be part of that management program. But to be able to control virtually all of those larvae, or 98, 99, whatever percent, and not allow them to then go ahead and come out as adults and lay eggs, that's been a real game changer for us. I know Corteva's going to have a new rootworm product come out here. They think around 2030, but those goalposts always move because you're dealing with the EPA. But they think that that's pretty promising. It's always good to have the new traits come out, because some of the first existing traits already have resistance, build up to them. So we need to continue to realign that approach. Um, Short corn is another one of the new technologies everybody's talking about. Everybody wants to have short corn. It's a great concept. In my opinion, from the product selection perspective, it's going to have yield before it ever comes to the market, or be pretty darn close so that the other values it brings can offset that. So when it's proven that it does, it will be an exciting technology because the standability is so much better. I know James talked earlier about green snap, and we used to always say I-35 and west has to have better green snap, but I will argue for years now, and we look at it as we need to have good green snap tolerance in all of our hybrids because we're getting these wind events we have for a couple decades now at least, where we'll have a huge green snap event in Illinois or eastern Iowa or southern Wisconsin every year. So short corn, because of its increased standability tolerance, is going to be beneficial for that. You think of all the fungicide applications that go on at the tasseling time frame. Now all of a sudden with this short corn that's 6 feet tall, 7 feet tall on down, you're going to be able to get over that with with pretty much any post application rig. So your regular John Deere sprayers that you see so many of out there, they'll be able to get over that. You won't need a Hagee or something like that. So those are a couple of the big advantages that short corn will give us. But again, the yield has to be there. So, just because we want it to be a good technology doesn't mean it'll work. Another one that should be pretty close to the market is the HT4 in soybeans, which it's just going to add a couple more herbicide tolerant traits. I believe it'll have tolerance to the Callisto type products, that family of chemistry. But the big one is it'll stack the 2,4-D and the dicamba together. Now, you might think that that's not really that important now that they've almost removed our ability to put dicamba on post-applied in soybeans, or have in a lot of cases. But to me, I've used the Liberty program or the Enlist program for about 3 years now. I'm very happy with the control I'm getting. I've got my water hemp control. It's not Roundup on grass. I've got to really kind of manage that, but I'm very comfortable with what I'm getting on weed control. But every year I get drifted on out of my neighbor's cornfields. Okay. So the dicamba products that are getting sprayed on corn to kill water hemp, which we really, really need. I mean, those are very important to have those tools. They're still drifting into my soybeans. So when that technology comes out and I know the yield's there and the new varieties, I'm going to jump on that immediately. I'll continue to use my Enlist Liberty as my main soybean product, but not have to worry about drift coming in out of my corn. So I think that's about it that I see on the really near horizon, unless James got something maybe that I missed.
No, I think you covered it pretty well. I think there are some new corn rootworm stacks. Actually, there's 3 of them on the timeline. It's going to be very interesting, as Craig said, to see what actually comes with the EPA. And of course, when you're doing that stuff, it also requires international approval. And that just seems to have slowed down every single year ever since conception. I would double down on the short corn. I do think that there's a reality that short corn could be a huge player in the Midwest market. There is some concerns out there of silage and whatnot, but the reality is it seems like a lot of what you're doing is you're changing stock into even thicker leaves and wider leaves in some breeding programs. You're just changing the structure of the plant, but you're not reducing the amount of leaves in almost all the breeding programs. There is 3, if not 4 different ones going on right now, and they're all kind of a little bit different. I think, as Craig said, it won't make a darn bit of difference if we have 6 foot tall, which there is varieties of that out there, if the combine can't get under the ear and if it doesn't yield. Because of the 3 most important things that farmers, whether they want to admit to or not, the 3 most important to farmers is yield, and yield. Though, by the way, it can't fall over. But at the end of the day, yield is the only thing that really matters to the bottom line, because you take When you take your entire costs, the easiest way to reduce your cost is to divide it by more bushels per acre. That's just how the math works, no matter how you sharpen your pencil. And on top of just straight yield, in order to stand, it's going to have disease tolerance. It's going to have root tolerance. When we're looking at currently hybrids that we're evaluating, as we're walking through those plots and pre-commercial plots and stuff like that, if you go just a range or two over sometimes, which I've done or whatnot, I go out and then all of a sudden all the corn's 4 foot shorter. There's spots where there's 5 foot corn, there's 7 foot corn, 8 foot corn. There's a lot between that 6 and 8 foot tall stuff. And just when you think of how much smaller of a kite that will be, and you know, when I graduated college, derecho was a pretty unique word. Anymore, it seems like we get at least 2 a year in Iowa. It's getting pretty crazy. So anything we could do to do that. And I would agree on the HT4 situation. Whether or not dicamba ever comes back to the post-application method, I think the protection against it getting drifted on, or being able to add that to your pre-emerge herbicide program and get some of that residual that dicamba can provide. Pretty excited about that. There's also HT56, multiple different versions of herbicide tolerances in the pipeline for multiple trait suppliers. So we're pretty excited about that. But yeah, with that, pretty excited about what's coming in the future. Even more excited about we're going to be launching, as Craig said, the end of the month here. We've basically all but wrapped up what we're looking at bringing forward to our new corn and soybean varieties here, and we'll internally announce that first. But then we'll start getting that stuff put out there as we start selecting where the plot seed goes to our different dealers, seed reps. So.
Well, I appreciate that, and definitely excited for those things that you guys mentioned coming down. What do you guys think timeline for something like that is realistic for a grower, like with HT4 trait and soybeans?
Ironically, I think all these traits are stacking up 27, 28, 29, 30. The end of this decade should have another round. But as you said, with forward-looking statements, today's political environment and corporate giant environment, a lot can change in a very short amount of time. So I don't think that means it will ever speed up, but there's things that can make it come to a screeching halt. And that's what we need to not have happen, because we need these technologies coming forward.
We don't get too excited and don't start talking in depth to our customers until they start giving us like we expected in Q1 or Q2 or whatever the next year, because I'm pretty sure there was a time when HT4 for soybeans was supposed to be 24, 25. I think I remember that back in the teens.
If not for sure, 26.
Yeah, so that goalpost has moved to get back to our football analogy, and it always does. There's just no predicting it. So we're excited about some of it, but we won't get too excited until we're within a year or so of release.
Well, no, that makes sense. Thank you. One thing not on our notes that I do want to touch base on real quick. So to throw curveballs or call me Mr. Muddy Waters. Is there anything that we can share with our listeners to this new group of suppliers that are kind of stepping into the game, that are looking to making edits on technology that's already been out there, but maybe rolling it back into the market?
Yeah, I think there's a handful of them out there that are there's a few that are getting closer to actual commercial launching of some of these edits. There's new traits coming out there from all kinds of not the large corporate genetic and trait suppliers that you'd think of. There's all kinds of startups. We've been in contact with one company that's actually, they are integrating a trait that actually at a infrared level changes the hue of the soybean plant, which then due to different stressors, whether it be nutrient deficiency, whether it be different types of infection from disease or insects or whatnot, that is actually just barely changing in the infrared scale the color of the plant, which then satellites and other telemetry can pick that up. So you could potentially be spraying to solve these problems 2 weeks sooner than you'd ever see it by the eye. As far as the gene editing stuff, that there is so many companies out there working on that. But the other reality is these traditional large genetic suppliers, it's not that they're not doing that. They're working on using AI assisted breeding. They're working on using all kinds of gene editing tools. There's definitely some new ones. I actually have a meeting set up with one of them here in a couple weeks, talking about how another thing that's unique to us is we have some of our own genetic lines and pool on the corn side that we can pull from, and if we can take those, which are realistically better place to start than just take off patent things and have to breed back a whole many more years, we're closer to the current platform or at the current yielding levels with our stuff. So all of a sudden we start adding that to ours, and we could maybe even leapfrog up. Pretty excited about it. Like we talked about seed treatments and whatnot. Would we love to have our entire portfolio, just our own breeding program? Absolutely. But the reality is we are still going to focus on picking, whether it's chemistries or products or genetics or whatnot. We are going to focus what's best for our customer and bring that forward.
Well, and I know you say that sincerely, not just because we're doing this and we're in the business of this, but your name's on the bag, right? Like there's a lot of power to that. I know we talk about being locally owned, independent, family owned, American owned. You guys have quite a bit of skin in the game, almost literally. So I wanted to mention and bring up the new companies coming up, and what I would say the designer companies, is because just to show the point that not only are we on in the leading edge of tapping into all of these multi-billion-dollar budgets, right, from all of these great large suppliers, we've got access to that, but we're also working with these new startup ones. So at any rate, I think we've talked quite a bit about all of this. Is there? I'd like to do any final thoughts as it relates to any of this.
I would just say, as you're talking about these new startups and just everything we've discussed so far, I hope you get the sense of, we really believe in competition, and it's so important for independent seed companies to be in this business and remain in this business and strong. That is probably the number one, even though they may not realize it, that is probably the number one concern farmers should have. Because if you get down to just a couple of corporate companies that are delivering all the seed, that's going to be a bad day. Pricing is going to be crazy. Choice is going to be crazy. So it is important that we stay very strong. It's important to have this approach of we want competition. We want as many genetic suppliers as we can choose from, so that we can choose the best thing for our specific areas in particular. And for us, that might not just be our footprint. I mean, we may have a hybrid that works good in eastern Illinois, or in Illinois and eastern Iowa, might not work in our western footprint, and we'll still bring that to the market. And that's a value to the customer. And we talked a lot about traits. We sell a lot of conventional corn. We are not a trait company. We are not pushing traits just to push traits and make a profit. If we have customers that have a demand for conventional, and if it's a great fit in a certain area, we're more than happy to be able to supply that. My own family farm in west central Illinois, which should be a very big traded area, we're going to be a third conventional corn this year, just because the hybrids are there. They're going to perform just as well, unless we have the presence of the pests, unless we get a corn borer year or something like that. But in this kind of a market, I just look at it as a great way to save some input dollars, and I'm still getting the kind of yields I've been using it for years, as my silage corn. Anyway, so I know it can control the weeds. We have huge pockets, especially north central Iowa, where there's just a ton of conventional corn. So I think that's important. It's important because we're not pushing one particular trait over the other. We just try to bring what our farmers need and not anything more than they need.
Amen to that, Craig. Thank you. I appreciate that. JC, usually when I'm doing these with Craig, I'd like to have a final thought and ask him what's some advice he'd give to his younger self. And so I'm curious, what's some advice that you'd give a young JC getting out of college or getting ready to get back into the game and get back on the farm?
If I could go back to something in agriculture about that, it would probably be start learning more about herbicides, because Roundup's going to not work anymore. And I probably wouldn't necessarily believe that at the time. But maybe another thing that I'm looking forward to and maybe would give advice to is make sure that you talk clearly into the microphone, and then you might not have to have the Britney Spears headphone set. But if it works and makes you guys listeners hear better, then we'll go ahead and keep doing it.
That's a good point. It's a good look, though, too, honestly. I'm not going to lie. I'm a little jealous.
Cornelius Blue there.
But well,
I did pick the blue over the green, but I shut off the shiny stuff for most of the presentations.
Yeah.
Hey, Juan, do you know what I would have told my younger self?
What's that?
In light of a lot of our conversation earlier there, don't waste your time becoming an NFL fan. Just stay a college football fan.
Especially not the Broncos.
Particularly
that's a good
Broncos.
point. That's a good point. That's fair. Carry on. We're going to have to edit that out. But at any rate, folks, thank you so much for joining in. If you have any questions about anything we talked about, or you'd like to hear something else, please don't hesitate. So check us out on socials. You can find us on Instagram and TikTok and X, Facebook, you name it. Just look up Cornelius Seed or Planet Profit. So until the next one, have a good day.